Okay, we are back. We are again on Facebook Live, and we're back with part 2. Part 1 was with Greg Fallon. Make sure you check that out. Part 2, we are, myself and my co-host, we're going to talk about one of my favorite to be obsessed with movies in the creepy spectrum, and that is Eyes Wide Shut. Let me see here. Let me get out of here. Give me a minute to get back in. It kicked me off. I'm trying to keep this feed live. And we are good, right? Okay. So, this is part 2 of the Halloween edition of Crosswit. Part 1 was with Greg Fallon. Part 2 is myself and Greg Borse. And the subject of the part 2 is going to be a film that came out in, I believe it was 1998, 1999. 1999 time frame. It wasn't well received. Most people didn't like it. It was Stanley Kubrick's final film. He's a famous director. If you don't know anything about him, you have to look him up. But he directed 2001, and he's kind of
2001: A Space Odyssey, and also Full Metal Jacket,
which is for the Marines. That's going to be the primary one you're familiar with,
and The Shining.
Which was obviously the Stephen King book.
And I think there's a connection between the two of these films.
Okay, so and we're going to talk about that. So, Eyes Wide Shut was a film that starred Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman back when they were married. And the film, if you haven't seen it, or if you have seen it, you kind of need a recap of it. It basically follows the night in the life of a specific night in the life of Tom Cruise's main character, where he finds out early in the movie that his wife allegedly, or she claims that she's had thoughts about another person, another man, and he kind of goes on a walkabout through the town, and during this walkabout he encounters a lot of strange situations. One of them to include a what appeared to be some type of satanic or ritual orgy in a giant mansion, and then he has to, which later he finds out was some of his friends or a close friend of his hosted, and he's dealing with this, and he's dealing with all these weird this series of weird events all night long, and really no explanation for any of it. The movie kind of ended with a real weird ending that didn't really tell you what went on or why it went on or if it was even real. And I have watched this movie honestly, I've probably seen it 50 times. I bought it 10 years ago when it was, I think, probably one of the earlier times it was on DVD. And I have watched it, and I have my own views about it. But my views are secondary today because my co-host, who teaches film and sent me a very interesting email last night about his views of it, we're going to start with him, and we're going to get his interpretation of it and some interesting points. So that being said, Eyes Wide Shut. Greg Borse, give us a better recap of the movie than I did because you just watched it last night, and then let's hear your thoughts on it.
Well, it's a story of a man who has a sudden crisis regarding the status of his marriage and the status of his life, really. And it begins with the plot overview is it begins with this very, very stylish couple, beautiful. Obviously, it's Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise at the height of their itness as a couple in the culture. Obviously, why Kubrick chose to cast them. I believe that Nicole Kidman was making another film at the time. Kubrick was in London. They met with him. He decided to cast them together. And my experience of seeing the film when it came out is very much the same as what Casey just described. Didn't like it. And the complaints about the movie were that it was too slow. And while it was advertised as an erotic thriller, it is anything but an erotic thriller. It really is not that. It's something else altogether. And so, as is the case with most Kubrick films, it's almost like you don't know what you're looking at while you're watching it the first time, and then 10 years later you come back and you look at it and you're like, oh, something else was going on the whole time and I didn't realize it. Casey's, asked me about it. My initial response was, I didn't think very much of it. He's like, dude, you've got to watch this film again. Yeah. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna. And I did my due diligence for tonight and in thinking about the film and also in teaching film. Because Kubrick one, he's a consummate filmmaker. If for nothing else, even if you don't like his films, you will appreciate his style and his attention to detail are rivaled by very few in Hollywood.
Zoom in.
So one of the things that struck me when I did a little bit of research about the film, after watching it again twice, is that Kubrick held the rights for this film for 39 years before he made it. He bought the rights for it in 1960. Now, he didn't have to compete with a lot of people because the film is based upon a story called Troom Novelle, which means Dream City.
Okay.
And Casey and I had a conversation on the phone the other night, and I said, what do you do with your eyes wide shut? You dream. And by the way, Casey, I said that.
Yeah.
You don't have to believe me, but I said that before I found out what the source material was.
Oh, I totally believe it.
So when I found the source material, I was like, boom, right? So to give our viewers a little bit of recap of the plot, man and a woman getting ready for a party. They have a daughter. They have a babysitter. They live obviously somewhere off of Park Avenue in Manhattan. They are very well off, very stylish, obviously very good looking. They go to this party. It's Christmas time. Every scene that you see up to a certain point in this film has some element of Christmas in it. A Christmas tree, Christmas decorations, and it's an elegant party that they show up to. They separate from each other like any good married couple does. They don't cling to each other all night long. They socialize.
Right.
She ends up dancing with a man who begins to try to seduce her, and I'll come back to a couple of details about that. He is taken off by a couple of very, very beautiful, young, model-looking women who are flirting with him, obviously. So you've got the man flirting with her, and the whole way that Kubrick shot Nicole Kidman's scene with Svedor, the Hungarian,
Right.
is the camera just follows them circling on the dance floor.
Right.
And she's obviously had something to drink, some drugs. You never really see it. You see her drinking once.
Seems like she got drunk real fast.
Right. And then when they're dancing, as they go around and around, she seems to get more and more looser and more affected by whatever she's had.
Right.
There's no suggestion that she's been drugged against her will or anything like that, but she's having fun. The man's cheating. He offers to her that she's so beautiful and asks her if she is familiar with a Roman poet's Ovid poem cycle. I don't have the name of it here, but he mentions Ovid.
Right.
And I looked up the title that he mentions to her. And basically, in ancient Rome, this cycle of poems by Ovid was really a guidebook for how to cheat on your partner.
Wow.
So he's trying to tell her, you're married.
Not so subtly, though, right?
Right.
I mean, he's basically just throwing it out there.
Right. He's throwing it out there, and she resists him. She says, no, I'm married. No, not tonight. He wants to take her off to show her the pleasures that are available.
Right.
And she says no, and she wanders off, and she finds her or before she finds her husband, he gets called away from the two models. And at one point, when he's walking with these two beautiful women, he says, where exactly are you taking me? And
Yep.
they say, to the end of the rainbow.
Right.
Now, anybody in film is going to say, end of the rainbow, that's Wizard of Oz. So, number one, right? What does the Wizard of Oz, the end of the rainbow, what does that mean? But he gets called away, and he's called to the host of the party who has a woman in a bathroom that it looks like he might have just had sex with, even though she is clearly compromised.
Absolutely date rape.
Yeah, because the film cuts to a shot
It's
of
not
him.
funny, but it is.
No, it's not funny. Of him pulling up
Yeah.
his pants and then answering the door to
Yes.
let Bill come in. Bill is the Tom Cruise character. His name is Bill Haverford, and his wife's name is Alice. That's Nicole Kidman. And he kind of says doc, and Bill Haverford is a doctor, medical doctor. And this is important, the status that this couple has and the other world that they're going to be introduced to.
Right.
He says, can you help me out? And so he acts like the medical doctor. He checks her out. He gets her to wake up. We don't see what he does to revive her, but he obviously revives her. And then Ziegler, the host of the party,
Right.
tells the girl that she's going to have to be careful. He tells the doctor when he walks in the room, she took she injected herself with a goofball. A highball, whatever they call them. right?
Yep.
And she's sort of overdosed. But Tom Cruise's character is able to save her from that. And we'll come back to her as a female form. And after that, he goes home with his wife, and they have a conversation. I think the next day. You help me out. You've seen it 50 times.
Well, I got the impression that they had it
that night,
that evening.
I think they're smoking marijuana.
She gets some weed. She rolls a joint. She starts getting high. They're laying in bed, and she basically starts kind of antagonizing him, kind of like she's wanting to argue.
Saying those girls were flirting with you.
Yeah.
Right?
What were you doing?
Were you thinking that you would want to be with them? Mm-hmm. And then she says that the man that she was with was flirting with her. And then I think it's at that moment that she admits that she has had a fantasy about being with a sailor that she had met in a hotel in some past interaction that they'd had. And he obviously remembers that, and he's very upset by it.
Right.
He tells her, in fact, in that moment, he tells her, when she says, that guy I was dancing with was flirting with me all night long, he says, I love you, I trust you, I don't worry about that.
Yeah.
And that actually makes her mad.
Yeah, because she actually says, you seem awful sure about yourself.
Right.
And he says, his response is, no, I'm sure about you.
Right.
And that kind of makes her mad too. Like, just because you're capable, you don't think I'm capable of whatever.
And so this launches this night that Bill Haverford goes on. He had run into an old friend of his that he had been in medical school with earlier in his career, who had dropped out of medical school and become a professional piano player. And this guy's name is Nick Nightingale, the character.
Interesting name.
Interesting name. Very interesting name. And the attitude that you get from Bill looks like the kind of guy who is, proud of what he does, is reinforced by the fact that people like Ziegler and these high society people need him.
Right.
There are a couple times in the film that he uses with lower class characters money as his sort of pass to things.
Sure.
And sometimes he uses his doctor badge as his pass to things. But clearly we've been introduced to a couple who is married, has a daughter, where the wife doesn't seem to be totally satisfied with her trust that her bond with her husband is, everything it ought to be.
Right.
And this causes him to start thinking about whether it's everything that it ought to be. And so he ends up leaving in search of something, right?
Yeah.
And this takes him to meet his old friend Nick Nightingale, who's playing at a piano bar in Greenwich Village. Oh, and by the way, the entire film was filmed in London. Greenwich Village was built as a stage at Pinewood Theatres, which is a very famous filming location outside of London.
Right.
So they didn't film in New York. In fact, the only filming they did in New York was to do green screen filming to show behind Tom Cruise's head when he was driving through the city. That's all faked in a sense that they had Cruise go to New York and just drive and film that. But everything else is filmed in London because Kubrick was famously terrified of flying. And he was in London and wanted to do the whole thing there. And so he meets his friend Nick Nightingale, who let slip that he sometimes gets hired to play at these really, really high-end parties that are filled with beautiful women, but he's always blindfolded.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's interesting, not to get too far into this, but it's interesting because I've never bought the fact that was an accidental slip or that he was just a piano player. I always thought there was something deeper to his character.
I read something where it said, he let it slip and it was the worst mistake of his life. I don't think that guy let it slip. I think that guy is placed so that he tells Bill what he needs to hear.
Absolutely.
And he asks him, you can't go to, because this is the way Bill reacts. He's like, there is no way you are going to that gig tonight without taking me with you. And he's like, it doesn't matter. You couldn't get in anyway. You don't have the password. But then Nick gives him the password. The password significantly is the word Fidelio. And he also explains to him that Fidelio is the word, they took it from a Beethoven piece. Fidelio can be translated as fidelity, but for Beethoven, that I don't want to say that concerto is called Fidelio Married Love.
Okay.
So it's specifically fidelity in marriage is what that word means.
Okay.
So the password to this elite, secret, out in Long Island mansion, wherever they are, thing, the password to get in is married love, fidelity to marriage. And that's important. So he says, but it doesn't matter if you have the password because you don't have a costume.
Right.
You have to have a costume. You have to have a mask on.
So it seems like he's giving him instructions
on how to do it.
Get there. He's told him how to get there, where it's at. He's told him the password, and he's told him what to bring. But he's not. This is all a slip.
Right.
Obviously not.
And it's not. And I talked to Casey earlier about the lighting in the movie too. One of the interesting things about the way Kubrick shot this film was he didn't use any Hollywood lighting. No reflectors, no backlight, no nothing. Every scene in the movie is lit with just the regular, natural lights of lamps and Christmas lights and neon lights on the street. No overhead lights, no spotlights, no reflectors, nothing. And that's tough to do. And so I read a little bit about the technical stuff, and they had to do a lot of stuff post-production to sort of enhance,
clean it up and make it stable.
Make it work. But you mentioned Nick Nightingale. I noticed immediately in the scene between Nick Nightingale and Bill in the piano bar, the concerto place, I can't remember what it's called.
Right.
He's Halloween lit. He's lit from below, and all of the shadows come up his face. And so when you guys go watch this film, you're going to see Bill talking to a devil.
Yeah.
So your idea that it's not a slip is absolutely on. It's on point.
And let me and to interrupt just a second here and to give another example of this. And this is something I just only picked up because you taught me this when you told me this. Me and my wife were watching the movie What Lies Beneath with Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer. Okay?
Yeah.
And there's a scene in there when it's not subtle. I mean, she's wearing a red dress. She refers to the forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
But she's sitting there in one scene and she has a candle between her legs as she's sitting down. And the light is coming up and she looks as much of a devil as you can possibly look.
Right.
And I told Sasha, like, I knew what I was talking about. I was like, I know what that's called.
Yeah.
But that's in another example of that. So when
and the other thing is that I want you to understand too that there's a long kind of psychological reasoning behind why Halloween lighting is the lighting of evil.
And that is?
And that is, in hell, the source of light comes from below.
Wow, that's creepy, guys. Exactly.
Does that make sense?
There's no light from above, which
no, it doesn't
God,
penetrate from above.
Sun,
it comes from the fire below.
Yeah.
So that's how that all. I don't know if that's how that all, but it's how it all ties in, kind of.
Right.
So yeah, Bill gets the password. He gets his costume. He goes, interestingly, to a place that's called Rainbow Costuming. There are rainbows all over the place.
Right.
In fact, there's two different worlds in this film. There is the rainbow world, which is filled with the regular people.
Right.
And then there is some other world that operates under that is not, that the rainbow people are not allowed to participate in, if that makes sense.
You're going to have to hit me with that one more time.
Okay. So there's Christmas tree lights and rainbows all over the place.
Right.
In the upper world. All right, here's my contention. I said to Casey, on the one hand, eyes wide shut. What do you do with your eyes wide shut? You dream. So maybe this is a dream. So one way that you guys can approach this film when you go look at it is that this all is a dream that the main character, Bill, Tom Cruise's character, has. So that every scene that you see is actually a projection of his own dreaming. And that makes a certain sort of logic for the film. Like that he could see like his wife's fantasy of having sex with the sailor.
Right.
That's not her fantasy. That's his projection of her fantasy. That's him seeing that.
Okay.
Not her thinking that.
Right.
So that would work with the dream logic, right? That's dream logic. On the other hand, what it reminded me of is Pulp Fiction, okay? And this is a little bit of a side. Pulp Fiction is a very strange film, but most of our audience will Matt, have you seen Pulp Fiction? Okay, so Pulp Fiction, one way to look at it, and this is, by the way, not my interpretation. I had a friend who sort of clued me in on this after he saw it, because to him it was obvious. He's like, oh, yeah, all of Pulp Fiction doesn't happen in Los Angeles, it happens in hell. This is the Inferno. Marsalis is the devil. And Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta's characters are junior devils that work for the henchmen. And they operate at this level of authority. And Bruce Willis's character is, songbird, nightingale, sings at night? Absolutely. And I'll get back to that, okay? But in Pulp Fiction, Bruce Willis's character is like an Orpheus character who actually rides on his motorcycle into hell and steals something from the devil.
Okay.
You've seen Pulp Fiction, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time, but yeah.
Well, even in that scene where he and Marcellus tumble into that other little hell that nobody knows about, that pawn shop where there is this torture at a medieval level, it's almost as if the devil can't control the devils that are all operating in hell. There are a whole bunch of devils that just operate independently, and they would rebel against him. All of hell is a rebellion. It's a rebellion against all authority, even the authority of Satan. And so that scene in the pawn shop is the devil himself suffering from the rebellion of his own constituents, right? And the reason that
we don't know what's in the briefcase. We'll talk about that too, Brad.
Exactly.
Good question, though.
It's the same thing that you find at the end of the rainbow. It's the MacGuffin. It's the thing that everybody hopes for. It's the big seduction. It's the payoff. And we're going to talk about Gnosticism in a little while in terms of Eyes Wide Shut. I'm sorry if I sound excited, but all of this
it's good. Yeah.
You know, but in Pulp Fiction, you know, Bruce Willis's character is the one that escapes hell because he's the only one that does the one thing that's good in the whole movie. He has a chance to leave that hell and leave Marcellus to his torture, and he can't do it. And he looks up at the wall and he sees that samurai sword, and he takes the sword of honor, right?
Yeah.
This is the Marines.
Right.
And he takes that sword and he goes back down and he saves the devil himself. And Marcellus says to him what? We were never here. This didn't happen. I never see you again. Right? You're free. And literally, Bruce Willis's character in Pulp Fiction is the only one that gets to ride off into the sunset with his girlfriend on the back of Zeke's motorcycle. Or no, Zed, right?
Right.
Who's Zed? Zed is dead. And she says, I just want a little potbelly. He gets to have what everybody else desires. And everybody else loses because they're after what's in the suitcase.
So is Brad, and we don't know yet.
Yeah.
No,
I only bring up Pulp Fiction because if you see Pulp Fiction as a movie that happens in hell, it makes sense. But if you see it as a movie that happens in the regular world, it can't make sense because it starts in a diner, it ends in a diner. It shows you John Travolta's character getting killed in the middle, but then we get to see John Travolta's character alive. In fact, when my wife and I walked out of the film, she's like, what did you think? And I was like, I don't know if it was clever or if it was genius. She said, what do you mean? And I said, well, John Travolta's character, Bruce Willis, shoots him in the face while he's sitting on the toilet, and then we see him again.
Right.
So it's out of sequence. And she said, no, that's what makes it tragic. Because John Travolta's character doesn't know from that moment that we see him after his death that everything that he does from here on out is going to lead directly to his death. And that makes his death tragic. And I'm like, damn, that's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good. So Tarantino gets huge points from me for doing what he did with that little hell, because hell is a universe that happens in a tiny space.
Right.
So I like it that Pulp Fiction happened in that diner. Now, Eyes Wide Shut doesn't happen in a diner like that, and yet, Casey, I think you would agree with me, the Greenwich Village and the New York world that Bill Haverford is in is very small.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like he goes anywhere.
He keeps running into people that he's run into before.
Right.
And he gets to the rainbow costume shop, and we get this weirdly out-of-place, absurdist kind of comic. You know, he wants a costume.
Right.
And the guy that's operating the shop says, well, the guy that you know doesn't live here. If I run into him, I'll help you out. And he's like, no, I need help from you tonight. And then when he goes in to get the costume, the dad discovers his underage daughter.
Well, before that, and to go back, we have another instance, or maybe one of the first instances of him using money to convince, he flashes his money. He says, I'll give you this plus whatever.
Yeah.
And in the cab, he uses money. He's always flashing money, like you said. So he seems to me, this is a character, and I kind of had a different interpretation of Eyes Wide Shut than you did. Maybe it's supposed to be that way. But my idea was that Bill thinks he's at the top of the world. He acts.
No, I agree with that totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And he doesn't realize it. But what he's finding is he's not a big fish in a small pond. He is a small fish in a big pond, or whatever. But he is very insignificant. But in his mind, he's egotistical. He's like, I'm a doctor. Everything can be solved with money or whatever. And he doesn't realize that the world he's walking into is absolutely like he's nothing in that world.
And I think this is his mistake. He look at what a medical doctor is, or his medical doctor. He thinks that he's somebody that is needed,
Right.
but he's not. He's somebody that is used.
And he's used from the very beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's used by that world. He's not needed, he's used. And you know what? He's replaceable, just like every one of what they call our hookers, that are these disposable women that they use for their own uses. And we'll get to this, I think, on the second page of my notes. Because for those of you viewers who aren't familiar with the movie, this turns into Bill getting his costume, watching a man get really, really angry that his underage daughter might be having sex with two Japanese guys, and the whole thing's really weirdly comic.
Yeah, it's weird.
He gets his costume, and then he gets in a taxi cab, and he goes all the way out to this really ornate mansion, where he has the password, Fidelio, and they let him in. And then he witnesses this bizarre kind of ritualistic, sexual, orgiastic thing going on, right? There's a ritual, there's a ceremony going on.
It begins with a ceremony, and
tell our audience what happens to him. He gets caught.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen the movie, basically what happens up to this point is this Nick Nightingale character, which you brought up, Matt, has a weird name.
He sings at night.
Sings at night.
Only at night.
And to me, I look at him as he's directing everything. Like he's an insignificant devil in a sense that acts like he's got no big part. He's just whatever. But in essence, it seems like the music he's playing is kind of directing all the events. He gets Tom Cruise's character to this place. So Tom Cruise takes a taxi cab after he gets his costume. He takes a taxi cab out to this location. He bribes a taxi driver to stay there with money, and I think he rips the $100 bill in half or something.
Yeah, he does. He says, "I'll give you an extra 100. Here's half of it. When I come back, you get the other half."
Right. So he's passing out money. He's already bribed the costume owner to open up to him at that hour. He's bribed the taxi driver. He walks up to the gate, and the two men at the gate, standing there like pillars in a sense, they stand there and they say, they basically don't volunteer any information out. And he says, he gives them the password, and they take him up to the front. And once he gets into the party, or into the whatever you want to call it, he begins to witness all of this stuff going around, which is like you said, the orgy, the sexual ritual, the satanistic or cultish, whatever it is going on. And as he walks through the party, he's in a mask, and no one's supposed to know who he is. He's not supposed to be expected there, but a woman who's also masked walks up to him and recognizes him immediately, almost as if she knew or was waiting for him to show up, almost as if she knows he's there. And she walks up to him and she questions him, like, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here."
And by the way, her voice makes it sound like she is the woman that OD'd in the bathroom with Ziegler.
Right. So I think what they're trying to insinuate there is that that's the same character. That she recognized him. I think he's expected to be there. I think she was assigned to him in a way. But she tells him, "You're not supposed to be here." She tries to warn him off, almost like she really is legitimately trying to warn him that, hey, they know you're coming, they know you're here, you need to leave or whatever. And then at some point during this conversation, they are interrupted, and someone actually asks him if they would, "Come with me, sir," and they direct him into this other room, which, to kind of pause in that scene, is kind of reminiscent in the opening scene where he is asked to go upstairs. He is met with someone who says, "Would you follow me?" and takes him upstairs to where Ziegler and the prostitute are. Now he's in the house again. This person walks up to him and says, "Would you come with me?" And they direct him into this room. And in this room, there is some type of perversion of a religious or Christian ritual going on. Okay, it seems to me it's a reversal, some type of black mass to some extent.
No, I think you're right, because the music that got played during that was a liturgy played in reverse.
Literally in reverse.
It was literally in reverse, and the other music that was also part of that scene was from India.
Yeah.
And in fact, there were complaints by Hindus that said that it was a sacrilege for them to use the actual words of the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
And so they so Kubrick actually took that out.
Okay.
But they did use the chords of the music. So you're onto it.
Yep.
One, the religious music is played back. It's a liturgy. It's played backwards.
So when he walks in there, again, there is this Nick Nightingale character who just happens to be playing. He knew this. He's told him this is what he did.
Yeah.
But he's playing this music and he's blindfolded and his back is turned to the ritual. And it seems like if your eyes were closed or if you took this at face value, that he is, again, just some insignificant character in this who, for some reason, they had to have to play this piano thing. I don't buy that.
Yeah.
To me, I think he's the fact that he is playing the piano is symbolic that he's really, in a sense, the entity that's running this whole thing, or he's representative.
Maybe or maybe not, but remember.
I think that
later Ziegler says that the whole thing was put on as a charade for you.
Yeah. So
I think that's important, whether it is actually a charade or not. It's important.
I do believe
because of what you're saying about Nightingale.
Yeah, I do believe it was put on for him. So when he walks into the room, essentially he walks into the room. They bring him into the room because allegedly he's been busted and he's not supposed to be there. I disagree with that. I think he's brought into the room because he is supposed to be there. But yes, he's busted.
Right.
All right. When he walks into the room, they warn him that what he's seen, he's not supposed to repeat to anyone, and they make him take off his mask. And when he takes off his mask, it's a symbolic threat, if not a literal threat, that everyone in this room, who you have no idea who
knows
they are,
who you are,
very powerful people,
yeah.
And later Ziegler tells him that in essence that you're nothing compared to these people.
Yeah, he said if you knew who was in that room, you would be frightened.
Yeah, if you knew who was in that room, and I'm not going to tell you who was, but if you knew who was in that room, it would scare you. It would be really bad. So he's in a room with people who are supposedly way more powerful than he can ever imagine. They all have seen his face. They all know who he is. And he is given an oath, or he's made to, basically he's threatened with secrecy. Hey, this is now in secret. And it seems to me that this is some sort of, I would guess, the initiation process. I think he was targeted from the very beginning. I think he was brought there. I think Nick Nightingale was either placed there or was coordinating the thing. Either way, he was working to get him there. He was given a passport, he walked in, he was escorted through the place, brought into that ritual ceremony, and then the master of that ceremony basically tells him, hey, what you've seen, you can't tell anyone, yada, yada, yada. Now let's let him go. They could, if it was real, they would have killed him. If it was a show, I don't know. But they let him go, and then they follow him the rest of the night as he walks around almost to see if he's capable of keeping a secret.
Right.
So there's some other stuff that goes on, and I'm going to cut this part. I'll be done in a second. But it is important to note that when he does go back to Ziegler's house and is explained to him, he does try to keep the secret. Like Ziegler questions about it, and he doesn't. He acts like he has no idea what he's talking about until he actually feels like, well, now I'm being tested again, or this guy's really, really, So anyway, that's
when Ziegler says to him the whole thing was a charade for your benefit, he says, what kind of charade ends up with a girl being killed?
Yeah, and we'll walk back to there in a minute. I just kind of gave you a fast forward, but
along the way, a couple of things that we've skipped is that every female that Bill encounters, with the exception of the first two models that escort him at the party, I think. Yeah. I have to go back and look. They're all physical types of Nicole Kidman at different ages in her progression.
Right.
Even the prostitute that he meets with a prostitute. He has an opportunity to have sex. When his wife expresses how angry she is at him for not admitting to her that he might be sexually attracted to other people, when she's admitting to him that she might be, he leaves and he meets a prostitute who is willing to have sex with him, and he goes to her apartment and there's a Christmas tree in there. And what's interesting about that scene is that the engagement that he has with her is so much more tender and nice than the engagement he's had with his wife or anybody else in the film. Like it's really nice, and yet it's not consummated. There's no sex act in the entire film that reaches climax. Not one.
Right.
And none of the encounters that Bill Haverford has with anybody is consummated.
Right.
He does not act on this. He's being tempted. In fact, you could see the whole movie as an initiation into sex magic, the Illuminati, the whole role, with the wife's participation, given the end of the film, that it's been priming him. He's denying. He gets interrupted. Sometimes he's ready, and then he gets interrupted. It gets interrupted, or he denies it until the very end. And the very end of the film is very disturbing.
Yes.
And strange. And along the way, let's go back to the beginning to some of the symbols and the motifs, okay?
Okay.
Because there are a couple of things that I noted when I was watching it and I was thinking about it. Like I said, the film is drawn from this 1890 story that takes place in Vienna, and basically the contours of the story are the same, okay? So the story seems to be questioning whether a traditional idea of marriage can withstand the seductions of the modern world.
Right.
You would be okay with that, right?
Yeah.
Forget whether it's a dream or a walk through the underworld. In that sense, it's just a married couple who are being confronted by these new sexual mores of the 1890s, which really are the same in the 1990s. It's that, and whether it's a dream or not, it's a film where the crisis is one of fidelity, one of marriage love, one of carnality and trust. Right?
Yeah.
Whether somebody can give themselves over to the carnality of being human, or whether there's another level that you resist that and that this thing is better or more worth it, right?
Right.
So in that sense, the film reminds me of the Nathaniel Hawthorne short story Young Goodman Brown, which everybody thinks they've read, but it's the same story. Young Goodman Brown is a young Puritan in Boston, and in the tradition of his family, every male in the family is required to go spend one night in the woods on an appointed day and then come back and lead the rest of his life. He goes out into the woods. His wife, whose name is Faith, Faith, doesn't want him to go. He goes into the woods, and there he meets a man. And the man says, I remember when I met your grandfather. I remember when I met your father. Follow me. And he follows him into the woods, and they have a conversation, but at the end of it, and there was a movie, by the way, that just repeated the imagery from Young Goodman Brown, where it's a witch movie, and at the very end, the woman strips naked, and then she goes to this forest, and she flies up into the trees. Did you all see that one?
Was that The Witch?
The Witch.
Yeah, it's called The Witch.
Okay, that's from Young Goodman Brown.
Okay.
That's exactly what he sees out there, but guess who he sees flies up into the sky with all the other witches? He sees his wife.
Oh.
He sees the bishop of his church.
Like Satan.
He sees all of the best Christians in his community. All of them are out there in the Salem witch thing, doing the orgy, doing the thing that Eyes Wide Shut is showing Bill, right?
Right.
So when he returns in the morning and he sees Mrs. Goodyhay, he can't unsee her at the orgy. When he sees the bishop, the man that is supposed to be the paragon of virtue, he can't unsee that man violating his dignity and the dignity of other people. When he sees his wife, he can't unsee his wife in... Now, this goes back to Bill's imagining his wife with the sailor.
Right.
He can't unsee that. Okay? So, Hawthorne ends the story by saying that he died a bitter and unhappy man. That his faith that night was ruined. His faith in mankind was ruined. Okay.
Okay.
That to me is very important. Now, when you look at Eyes Wide Shut, when they walk into that first party, and you mentioned this, there is a very weird Christmas star on the wall behind them.
It is not, if you haven't seen this, you can Google images. And I can't remember, there's actually, it's got a name, it's called something, but it is not a normal Christian star.
No, it's an 8-pointed star. It's the star of Ishtar.
Okay, so what is that?
And Ishtar is the Egyptian goddess. She's like Aphrodite, okay? She's like Venus. Roman Venus, Greek Aphrodite, Egyptian Ishtar. They are not the goddesses of fertility. That's a misnomer. So if you go on the internet and you look them up and they say she was a goddess of fertility, no, they're not. They're the goddess of lust, of sexual license, of carnality, and the ability to have sex without procreation, okay? Like in Roman myth, Demeter is the fertility goddess. Aphrodite is the virgin goddess who is the goddess of war and justice, who is untainted by her participation in things. The perpetual virgin, right?
Okay, right.
But Aphrodite is tainted by everything that she participates in. Her son is Eros, lust. Her brother is Ares. Ares is the god of war who knows no boundaries.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Apollo is the god of war that knows boundaries. He follows rules. He knows there's honor in war. Ares could give a crap. Aphrodite doesn't care. She'll give you everything that you ask for, but she will turn on you in a dime and she's that cruel face of Nicole Kidman against Bill in the movie.
Right.
That's the face of Ishtar. She will demand that you sacrifice to her. She will give you everything that you ask of her, but she will also take, okay? So you've got this occult symbol at the very beginning with this 8-pointed star.
Right.
Then later you have the orgy scene where you have the orgy on the outer edges.
Right.
Then you go into the other room, and this is what's really going on.
Yeah, the inner sanctum.
And this
room,
has got the
what
magic.
it's all really about.
It's got the magical circle in it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Which is
later
shot
on.
from above.
Yeah.
And the guy that's in the middle of the circle has a 2-headed eagle
Yes.
behind him.
Yes.
Which is one of the Freemasons. That's the sign of the highest degree of Freemasonry.
Yeah,
The
Scottish-
2-headed eagle with the crown, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very similar.
Okay. So it's suggested that guy
Yeah.
is the king of the, like, he's at the highest level of all of the esoteric Gnostic cults,
Right.
right? That believe in sex magic, believe in sacrificing individuality to each layer of knowledge that you get as you go up and up and up and up and up, right? So,
I think it's also, and it's fair too, I think it's also, and you have to look this up, it may be the family crest of the Rothschilds, I'm not sure.
no, I think you're right. I think you're right. But
which is significant because it's the Rothschilds mansion.
And it was filmed at the Rothschilds mansion.
Yeah.
And so obviously Kubrick is doing that on purpose.
Oh yeah. He didn't just pull that chair out of the closet, right?
Yeah, he's suggesting something. But oh, by the way, Ovid's poem that he was trying to seduce her with at the beginning, it's called The Art of Love. And by the way, the last name of the guy that was trying to seduce her, the Hungarian character, is Svador, Svador.
Okay.
That's one of the names of the real guy that founded a satanic religion in America.
Oh, okay.
So that's on purpose.
Okay, right.
Do you see what I mean? So
Yeah.
like all of your thinking, the occult, the Illuminati, the OTO, it's all in there.
And another thing too is, and I don't know if he meant to do this or if it was a whatever, but if I'm not mistaken, you have to check this, Matt, you can look this up. But I believe the two girls at the beginning, when the ones that they're taking them to the edge of the rainbow.
Yeah.
I believe one of them introduced herself as her last name is Windsor, which is
I missed that.
yeah. And I caught that one time, and I don't think I ever got a chance to look it up to see if it was relevant. But I remember thinking, did she say Windsor? And it was the time when Prince, whichever
Charles.
Well, no,
one of the younger ones.
Yeah, the younger one. He was real into in the news with him and Kate, his the princess or whoever.
Right.
Not Harry, but his older brother. Anyway,
Kate
I remember,
Middleton.
Yeah, and somehow Windsor had because I had thought about it. I'd heard that word obviously watching that thing, and then I watched the movie again and I caught that, and I wondered if it was relevant, but I don't know.
At any rate, what you see in the film is that Bill is being seduced, or he's being seduced by the idea that he might be admitted into this elite group.
Right.
And then he's rejected.
Allegedly, or supposedly, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
He's rejected. Ziegler says, I'm not telling you. It was all a charade.
Yeah.
You don't know who those people were. Mm-hmm. You're lucky, he says. You're lucky. You saw something that you shouldn't have seen.
Forget about it.
Forget about it, right? And so what happens at the end of the film?
Well, at the end of the film, first of all, there's some interesting things that happen before that. He goes, so he has his costume.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm missing.
So he has a costume, and he goes to take the costume back, and when he takes the costume back, he can't find the mask. All right, and when he's at the costume shop, by the way, he sees the girl and the men that she was with, and it seems like the owner somehow is okay with whatever was going on the first time. He's like, it's all good now. So his daughter being with these two older foreign men who it is what it is. I don't understand that part, but it seems like the owner of the costume shop is also okay with it. Like she's part of something that is also going on.
Yeah, it's almost as if he's agreed to sell her into prostitution.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like.
It's another thing he can make money off of.
So there's something. So that's a current thing. When he goes to take the costume back, the man looks through the stuff and he says, "Hey, where's the mask?" And Tom Cruise's character Bill couldn't find the mask, and it's no big deal. Just put it on my tab, and I'll pay you the extra money I told you I'd pay you plus the cost of the mask and yada yada. It's no big deal. It's money, whatever. He settles up with him. There's some other things that go on, but then he ends up going back home. And when he goes back home and he walks through the door, Nicole Kidman is laying asleep on the bed, and the mask that he couldn't find is laying right down beside her, and she's facing it.
But asleep.
So to me, that was the first time I really saw that and paid attention to it. That was my first inkling that, wait a minute, I think she was either there or she has been there. Maybe she wasn't there that night, but she's been part of this and she knows what's going on. And then his reaction to seeing the mask by her is he breaks down and cries. He just completely loses it. And she wakes up and he says, I'll tell you everything. And it reminded me of like when I was a kid and I lied to my parents and then eventually found out that they knew, and I cried, and then I said, okay, I'll tell you the whole truth, because at that point, so it seemed to me that he believed at that point that she knew everything that was going on and he was just going to admit to it. They stay up all night talking. It could be about something that literally happened. It could be about his dream. We don't really know. But at the end of the movie, they go into a toy store.
Hang on, before you get to that.
Okay.
Is it during that conversation where she admits that she had a dream that she was having sex with the sailor?
No, that was at the very beginning.
Okay, so she for those of you...
That started the whole thing.
There's a scene where she says, then I was having sex with... I don't even know how many men I was having sex, and I knew you were there.
Yeah.
I knew you were watching.
Well, no, I think that conversation did happen, but the initial sailor scene was at the beginning. But then
later she talks about she had a dream where she was having sex with somebody, and then many men, and she couldn't even count how many men, and she knew that Bill was there watching. So the suggestion with the mask on the pillow is that Nicole Kidman was there at the party that Bill got busted at.
Yeah.
She was one of the people that was there. And one of the things we just skipped over is that when Bill is busted, the woman that had tried to get him to leave the party says to the guy in the middle of the magical circle...
Okay, so let me hit that one, because this is genuinely like bullshit. And you can tell it's meant to be bullshit. Like, she stands up there. So what happens is he gets busted, and allegedly because he is illegally entered this secret society's ritual, they're going to kill him. That's kind of the implication. And so in order for him to get out of it, someone apparently has to offer themselves as a sacrifice. So this girl who is insinuated that Bill's, whose life saved at the beginning at the party, she's now appears in this balcony, overseeing the whole thing, and she's up on this very high place, and everything that she says sounds like she's reading it off a card. I mean, it's the worst.
Well, actually, the high priest's response to her sounds like it's being read off of a card too.
So it sounds like it's a prepared thing, and I think it's supposed to. So another reason why I think the whole thing was a charade, but I think it was an initiation ritual. I don't think it was just, I think that Ziegler's telling the truth. Well, this woman yells out something to the effect of, "Spare his life, I'll offer myself." And the master of ceremonies down there responds to her, do you know what this means? And you know that once you make a promise to us, it cannot be undone.
Right.
And even though he's talking to her, he's talking to Bill. He's letting him know that when you promise to keep a secret to us, there is no going back. When you enter into this is no going back.
This is really important, because when Bill leaves, and he's obviously being followed, he reads the newspaper the next day.
Right.
And he reads the account of the fact that the girl that he had saved in that bathroom died of an overdose.
Right.
Okay. If you, and I did this, whenever I teach film, so I tell my students, whenever a director or a cinematographer decides to give you a close-up tight shot of something for more than a second, that's their way of telling you need to pay attention to what's in here. Now, they cheat because they never give you enough time to see everything that's in there. But if you go back in and look at a screenshot of the story in the newspaper, you can read the whole story.
You can read the whole story.
You can read the whole thing.
So it seems like...
And it says all the typical things that we hear about girls in Hollywood and in the music industry and in the modeling industry that get flushed out the other end. It says that she had some troubles, that she fell in love with this designer, that he ended up breaking up with her because she was dabbling too much in this, and that she ultimately, and it says literally that the last time she was seen was walking to her hotel room in the company of two men giggling, and then she was found the next day overdosed. The name of the man who was the fashion designer that she had the affair with in the newspaper story is the real name of the assistant director of Eyes Wide Shut. is the guy that played the high priest in the scene that you just said was a big charade.
Wow. So that's
And I will add, Kubrick died 6 days after this film was done.
What was going on? So,
did he reveal too much about what's really going on?
That's the implication.
Which is what you, which is where
what
you started.
I believe. Yeah, I do believe that. So, okay, so here is, so he goes to this scene, and I've got to back it up. And look, if you're watching this and listening, there's no way you can keep up with what we're talking about unless you've seen the movie. And I tell you to watch the movie twice, and then come back and watch this on YouTube, and you'll understand what's going on here. But if you go back before he goes home, before he breaks down to his wife and tells her that he will tell her everything, he goes to Ziegler's house, which is the host of the party. It's his friend that essentially brings him into this entire thing. And when he goes to his house, he goes into his study, where there's a pool table, and his study is bigger than my house, I think. But he goes into his study, and Ziegler basically tells him, "Hey, listen, I know what you did last night.
Yeah.
All right, I know where you were." And Tom Cruise's character, to his defense, attempts to keep the secret. He says, "I don't know what you're talking about," yada, yada, yada. And then Ziegler calls him out on it, convinces him, "Hey, listen, it doesn't matter what you say. I was there. I saw you. Okay?" And then he says, do you know, like, how I felt when I saw how shocked I was when I saw you? Which I also don't believe. I think Ziegler was part of this whole process. And maybe he was part of the process and didn't even know it too. I don't know. But I think from the very beginning, Ziegler was part of the process. And I think he's testing him at this point to see if he'll, how hard it is to break him. Tom Cruise, I think, does a really good job. I think Ziegler's kind of pleased with the fact that he doesn't tell it, that he doesn't say anything. Or maybe he's not, and he decides, you're done here. But he tells him it was all a big charade. And then Tom Cruise pulls the newspaper article out that references the girl's death. And he says, "Have you seen this?" And then Ziegler says, "I have." And his response is, "Then tell me." And he's, I know you don't like Tom Cruise an actor. I think he did a really good job in this movie.
Maybe I have to change my mind. Maybe,
He sits there and he starts the typical Tom Cruise laugh, sarcastic, like, "Then explain to me what kind of charade ends with someone dead." And that's almost exactly what he said it. And at that point, Ziegler backtracked and says, "Okay, let's just cut the bullshit. All right, and I know it was a charade. And I know she was on drugs and she was whatever. She was there. We took her home. I don't know what happened." And then he says something really interesting. He says the investigation was cleared. The door was locked from the inside.
Yeah.
It was stuff that how would Ziegler know?
Yeah.
He's already saying...
The police have investigated it. The door was locked from inside. No hanky-panky. She OD'd.
So obviously what they're really saying is, yes, we put her in there. We fixed the whole crime scene. Everything's cleared. We're not saying we weren't involved. We're saying, I got the impression he was telling Tom Cruise, you need to chill out, keep keeping secrets, and understand that the people in that room are the most powerful people you'll ever deal with, and we take care of stuff. Don't forget that what you promised to us can't be undone. And I think that is, in a sense, his checking the box and saying, "You're good. Now leave here. Go home and square up with your wife." Which she's been in this since she was a child.
Which he does. No, I think you're right, because now we get to the creepiest thing about the entire film, which is the last scene. The last scene,
after they stay up all night talking. He tells her everything. She tells him everything.
And he breaks down.
And then the next morning, you can tell they've been up all night and they're very tense. Any married couple that's had a bad fight with each other and an all-nighter where you're still mad understands it. The next day you're just really sleepy and you're tired and you're tense and you really just want everything to go back to normal. You want everything to be okay. And they're walking into a toy store because they said, we agreed we'd take our daughter Christmas shopping. The toy store that they're in is not a normal toy store. There's a couple weird things about it. Number one, there's some stuffed tigers in a pile, and one of them just happens to be on one of the prostitutes' beds from the earlier scene.
Right.
Number two, which is the creepiest thing, the second creepiest thing about the movie, or about the scene, is behind them, as they walk around behind the girl, there's the big toy that's on display besides the tigers, is the magic circle, and you even used the term magic circle.
Right,
And
she at one point, the daughter is shown standing next to boxes, red boxes, row after row after row, and all of them say magic circle, magic circle, magic circle, magic circle.
And then
they shoot. There's a shot of daughters right here, row of magic circle here, Tom Cruise here, Nicole Kidman here, and right behind them are two men that were sitting at a table at the party at the beginning of the movie. So when they walked in and saw the 8-pointed star.
When they walk in there,
and they're old men.
They're having this discussion, and she says, basically they have agreed. I believe they have agreed that he is going to be initiated in his lifestyle. But then this was the twist to me. Then there was a scene that I got pointed out to later that I believe is the actual truth about the initiation. That it wasn't him. Okay, that he was just a stepping stone. He had to be initiated into this lifestyle for the true initiation to occur. And when she says there's only one thing left to do, and she uses, I won't even say it just blatantly here, but she uses a profane term for sex. Like you said, it wasn't let's make love. It wasn't let's make up. Yeah. It was let's do this as almost a symbol. And as they're saying that, or shortly after, the girl walks
right before
the girl walks away with these two old men that we just
saw behind them. Now we see the shot from the other side, and the little girl. It's funny because when you see the little girl's face, this is what she does. She looks up and sees somebody at the end of the aisle, and she smiles and starts to run toward him.
And she falls.
Then the camera switches to this side. And we're still paying attention to Bill and Alice, and they're having their conversation. But in between them, you can see her go to the end of the aisle, and these two men walk that way, and she goes with them.
So what I took from that is, and this is when I come up with my interpretation of the movie, or at least what went on, is that Bill had to be initiated into this as a consequence. Because in truth, what was really going on was they needed him to be on board with it and to see the worst version of every stage of Nicole Kidman's life, her past life, her previous life, what she's done, and where his daughter was heading in order for his daughter to achieve the life that they both want, from basically selling out and offering their daughter up to do it. And it seemed to me like the true initiation, or the true point of what had happened, was to set them up to accept their young daughter to now go and do whatever she needs to do to be initiated into this lifestyle. And obviously, in order to do that, they had to have both parents involved. And maybe Nicole Kidman's was voluntary, and maybe Tom Cruise's was under duress or under extortion or whatever. But the bottom line is that at this point, he is completely broke down. He has given up. He's not going to fight it. He's going to let it happen. And he is completely submitted to whatever went on. And he has basically given up everything he has to this group, even his daughter. And that was my interpretation.
Well, I agree with you. I think the daughter was the goal the whole time. Bill and Alice are collateral. Alice may have been involved the whole time, but so the question becomes then.
I like how I was going to go, but your version is, and your version is a whole nother beast.
Well, I mean, it's a question of, okay, so what's the point of all this? Like, if this happens in the real world, how does it work? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because what power could you have over me by inviting me to a masked orgy at some rich guy's house? That doesn't make any sense. Because I don't have anything, and I'm talking about me. Mm-hmm. I don't have anything to offer you.
Well, that's why you're never going to get invited.
Okay, well, that's not true. That's not true, okay. Because Gnostic religions happen in concentric circles. Okay.
Oh, here we go.
And at the most outer edges, the outer edges are occupied by what we like to call useful idiots. And those people only ever operate at the most outer levels because the benefit that the group gets from them is the minimal.
Like food.
It's like food.
They just sustain the bills.
But like, yeah, paying the bill, money, right? So
pay your dues.
So not everybody gets to get to the inner circle. So this is the way it's got to work, okay? You mentioned the Rothschilds. You mentioned these really, really elite people. The only way a Gnostic sort of the power blackmail that goes on can work is if it's exercised from a position of power that it already has. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So let's say that I'm a person in power and I want to bend other people of power to my will.
Okay.
I want to bend other people of power to my will. I got no use for people with no power.
Right.
Except as fodder for getting other people to be seduced into the circle where then I can have one over on them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what I would have to do is I'd have to figure out how to get them to compromise themselves in such a way that I would have the upper hand.
Sure.
Okay, so in the drug trade, the way this happens is I'm your 19-year-old older cousin who's already dealing drugs somewhere else in Arkansas, right?
Yep.
And I start giving you drugs, you 8th grader, for free.
Sure.
And then at a certain point I say, hey, if your butt, you could make some money if you wanna sell some to your buddies.
Right.
Oh. And so I let this kid do this for a year, and then I come and say, okay, now I'm going to give you more, and what I want you to do is I want you to get rid of this among your buddies, and you can keep this cup, but I need you to give me back this much, right?
Right. Yep.
Okay, so after I have seduced you up to that point, there's a certain point where you can't turn back.
Right.
There's going to be something that's asked of you that you can't say no to, because the consequences if you're saying no to it are either the law or my exercising my vengeance on you.
Right.
Okay? So instead of getting all wacky about whether people worshiping Baphomet are people who really believe that there is a devil that exercises power over your soul that you can be seduced to do evil things to the eternal damnation.
Right.
Think of it only as a really, really smart Machiavellian way to seduce other evil people to succumb to your evil will.
Okay.
That's what I think this movie is actually about.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why there's nothing supernatural in it at all.
Yeah, because it's not really.
That's why
Ziegler says it's all just a charade.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean
because
that it's
it
not,
actually is.
It doesn't mean it doesn't have a purpose.
So if you're a poker player,
Yeah.
and I reveal to you that I am bluffing in order to get you to believe that I'm bluffing because I'm not really bluffing, but I am bluffing,
Yeah.
that's a charade. That might be what that guy was doing. Do you see what I mean?
What's going on with it? So where is the girl going at the end of the movie?
So
If
what
not
do these people need? What they need is they need the girls at the party for Bill.
Yeah.
They need those girls. They need them to believe that if they do what I say and go seduce that guy, that doctor, you see that good-looking doctor
Yeah.
over there that's married? I need you to get him away from his wife.
I need to compromise
and
him.
take him exactly.
Yeah.
So I have to convince them that I have something that I can give them that will make it worth their compromising their own integrity and their own dignity.
Right.
That's called, I don't know.
Extortion?
It's called the music business.
Right.
It's called Hollywood. It's called stardom. It's called Bryan Singer putting you in his X-Men movie.
Sure.
That's what that is.
Sure.
So if you get down to like maybe what Kubrick was doing, and this is from the very original comment you made about the film, maybe what Kubrick was doing was exposing the whole Hollywood seduction game.
Yeah, the whole thing.
That just chews people up and spits them out. It's not that it believes in witches or devils or upside down stuff. It uses that as the ritual that convinces people that it actually exercises power. And what's weird about it is that it does actually exercise power.
Now, and real quick on this, this is something interesting too. That
It does.
Yeah, it does.
It can prove that it works.
So when after he made this movie, and I'm probably going to screw up exactly how this happened. But after he made this movie, the company Paramount, I'm not sure, whoever it was, told him he needed to cut like 24 minutes out of the movie to maintain the R rating. They wanted 24 hours or 24 minutes cut of the movie. So before that, they call him into a room, and one of his friends stated that they yelled at him, and the executives and whoever it was were really, really mad about what he had shown. Now, going back to what you're saying, these are people who speak Hollywood. These are Hollywood execs. These are people who, even though whatever was in the movie may not have been literal or not literal, whatever, the methods that they used and the purpose for which they used them were very real, and they knew that he was exposing that, possibly.
Right.
And they were really mad about that and told him that he had to take some things out, and I don't know actually what they told him to take out or even if this really occurred. But if it did occur, and then after he died, and I'm not insinuating that anyone killed him, But at very minimum, after he died, it would given them it'd get whoever needed 24 minutes taken out an opportunity to do that without him opposing, right? So if he was exposing the Hollywood system, the music business system, the government system, and any other major power thing, I mean, who knows? If it was exposing a method that people use to seduce and control people, then
look, my only point is this: one of the reasons that when you start to investigate, and guys, please don't fall down a rabbit hole tonight, drinking bourbon and getting on the internet and start looking up the Illuminati.
I don't need bourbon to do that, bro.
But let me just give you
doing it anyway.
Let me give you a shortcut for this, okay?
Yeah.
All of those secret societies are Gnostic religions. Gnosticism merely says that there's a secret piece of knowledge that if you have it, you can exercise the power over everything that you want.
Okay.
That's the seduction. It's the idea of the secret piece of knowledge. So what you have to do is you have to become an initiate. And the first level of initiation will tell you that you have to scrub bathrooms. It's just like the military.
Yeah.
You got to do the lowest things. It's weird. The military uses exactly the same model.
Right.
Except it's not a lie.
Right. It's just the system.
But what these Gnostic religions have done is they've taken the true thing and they've substituted the truth for a lie at the center, and you can get people psychologically to act exactly the same way. That's what's so dangerous about them. Because we are psychologically attuned or we are preternaturally desirous of actually knowing the truth. And we are willing to sacrifice for that. We are willing to fight for it. We know that in everyday life. And so when these Gnostic charlatans, they invent their religions around Jim Jones.
Yeah.
Every one of them. I'm reading about these cultic things, and I'm kind of laughing about it on one hand, and on the other hand, I'm like, this is just like every Gnostic religion I've ever read about. They all work the same way. If you're an initiate at this level, there are things you can't know. But you know what? You can earn the right to know the things that you don't know if you'll do this.
Right.
And at every step, it's a compromise. It's a
Right.
compromise of your own individuality and your own integrity. And it will also involve the violation of somebody else.
Right.
Because once I have you violating somebody else, breaking a law, then I've got you. It's the way the mafia operates. Machiavelli already wrote about this. He said, right in the middle of The Prince, Machiavelli says something very, very interesting. He says, mind you, I am writing to a knowing reader. I am not writing about good leaders of good people. I'm writing about bad leaders of bad people. Bingo.
There you go.
Machiavelli was not telling us this is the way power ought to operate. He was telling us that in Italy at the time, this is the way it is operating. You know why? Because you're bad and your leaders are bad. And that, by the way, is what HBO's, the series that started the new golden age of cable called The Sopranos, was about.
Absolutely.
It was about the way the underworld operates. It's devils competing against other devils.
It was, yeah.
And that the end of that series, I remember people being so mad about the last scene of the last episode of that film, and they asked me, and I was like,
did they die?
I was like, that was brilliant. I was like, Tony says that he's leaving the life. And the life says, just like in Eyes Wide Shut, you don't get to leave once you're in, right?
Right.
And he goes to a restaurant, and he's waiting for his daughter to show up to have dinner with him and his wife, right? The little Italian restaurant in their neighborhood that they love so much.
Yeah.
And we see a scene outside after he sits down of a car his daughter parks, she's trying to come across the street, a car almost hits her, right? She's like, what are you doing? And then she comes in and we see her push open that door, and we cut to a shot of a little bell that rings on the door, right? Ding-a-ling-a-ling, to indicate that somebody's coming in the restaurant. And the last shot of The Sopranos is Tony's back.
Yeah.
Because he sat with his back to the door, which you never do. And the last shot...
Vets don't do that, cops don't do that.
The last shot is of him going like this.
And it was over.
Fade to black.
Yeah.
We don't know if it was daughter walking in or somebody to blow him up. And this is the ring of Gyges. Socrates, Plato tells it, the ring of Gyges is of the guy that finds the ring that makes him invisible. And he uses the power to seduce the queen, overthrow the king, and become king. And Socrates says, do you think that if everybody could get away with anything they ever wanted to do, would they do it? And most people say yes.
Yeah.
But one of the points of Gyges, which by the way is one of the roots of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, is, well, could Gyges ever be happy? If he actually believes that everybody will stab everybody in the back to get what they want, if they have the power to do it without the consequences, then he can never be happy because he's Tony Soprano for the rest of his life.
Right.
He's gained the throne, but he can never trust his friends.
Yeah.
He has to assume everybody's his enemy.
There's no peace.
And he always has to look over his shoulder.
Yeah.
There will never be any peace.
Never be any
so
peace.
I use that in my philosophy classes. These are great examples of the same thing. You think that's happiness. Gnosticism offers you that as the key to happiness, and it's a lie. And so it's sad that the film ends the way it does for Bill, because what Bill reveals himself as a man that has no spine or courage or anything. He never consummates the thing that he desires, and he's never going to get the reward for the thing that he sacrificed.
Right.
I mean, that makes this a really kind of great movie.
I think
because
so.
that's the worst thing in the world that could ever happen to anybody, and he chose it.
And I am glad that that I have, if nothing else, I have said, hey, listen, we took a bad movie, and I've shown that there's something to this film, and I've got a teacher of film to agree with me and probably watch the movie again.
Well, I want to thank you for making me go back and look at it and think about it, because I really have not thought about it as a mature person until you said, Greg, you've got to take a look at this again. And I think it's. I need to think about it more, but I think there's really a lot there.
I don't think this is going to enter a conversation on it. I think this is going to be under like an undertone of our show. We're going to be talking about like stuff like this. Again, our time is pretty much up tonight. I don't want to go much longer because it's getting late, and I appreciate everyone tuning in. But we can talk about this in a future episode some more. Our next episode is right now is probably going to be on the 27th. And
right before Halloween.
Right before Halloween. It's not going to be a Halloween theme. It's going to be an event episode. It's going to be coming to you from the Pavilion in City Park for a Relay of Life event.
Matt, do you have access to any outdoor heaters that we might need on the 27th? This is going to be cold out there.
We're going to work that out, and hopefully we'll be coming to you from there, and there'll be more information on that in the coming days. So from us at Crosswit, from myself, my co-host Greg, thanks, man. Awesome show again.
Absolutely.
Matt, appreciate you doing what you do.
Thanks,
we'll see
Matt.
you guys next time, and take care.